Okay. Welcome to our media briefing and public access through live streaming over the internet. We welcome all those who are watching our media briefing today. We spent 2 hours going through a very lengthy third reading calendar and got through most of those bills. A few of them were circled. We'll be coming back Monday and starting fresh on a second reading calendar. And a lot of bills to be discussed next week. We've got Medicaid expansion, gas tax increase. A lot of those big issues will be debates that'll be on the Senate floor coming in our 5th week of the legislature. Last night we had our Senate President's dinner at the zoo, and I just wanted to give a quote of former U.S. Senator Bob Dole. If you're hanging around with nothing to do and the zoo is closed, come over to the Senate. You'll get the same kind of feeling. And you won't have to pay. So we had a very nice time at the zoo. The zoo actually has a chef, a very gourmet chef, and the dinner was a very nice dinner at the zoo and a great atmosphere there last night. I also just want to introduce you to Thomas Appiah, who's with us today. He's the chairman of the African Chamber of Commerce, a friend, and his job shadowing me on today, and at least for part of the day, and we want to welcome him.
Thank you.
We'll open it up to questions from the media.
Well, Senator Madsen declined to come, but I'm going to ask anyway about his medical marijuana bill. Do you have a position on that?
We don't have a position. Maybe could Senator Okerlund?
Yeah, no caucus position. We had a very brief discussion about this concept 2 weeks ago before it was even probably beginning to be drafted. So we knew that it was kind of in the pipeline, but certainly no position. It was long before there was any language that anybody could look at. So it's gonna, once it gets out and everybody has a chance to look at it, we'll be talking about it some more.
Have you any concerns about it? This is quite a radical departure from...
Anything with the word marijuana in it will create some concerns, but it's hard to, it's just completely too early to tell or make any comments until we see what the language of the bill is. We addressed at least a subset of this whole issue last year for those who have epilepsy, an extract of marijuana, cannabis, and that actually passed the legislature. But no predictions on this, or it's hard to even comment without knowing what the bill is even going to say.
Does it give you any heartburn?
No, I would address hard issues like firing squad and all kinds of things up here every year.
The minority caucus?
We have no position on it. We're aware that the bill will be introduced and filed, or has been filed, but will be introduced in the next few days, and we're interested to take a look on what's going on that. And of course, we generally don't take a caucus position, but we will be looking at it.
If it doesn't give you heartburn, does it give you munchies?
That might be better than smoking it.
Talking about getting into the 5th week here, we have a lot of those big issues coming up. Still a lot of bills in the pipeline. Do we have an updated count of just how many pieces of legislation have been introduced at this point, and what's ahead?
You know, the rules, the last report that we got was probably a couple of days old, and that's been 3 or 4 days ago, so I really don't have an updated list on that. This last week we have really started moving a lot faster, so until we get that report back, I don't have an updated number. Senator Van Tassel may have that at the end of his rules meeting today as we're looking at that, but we've gone through a lot of bills in the last couple of days. As you might have noticed, close to 40 bills, House bills, that we passed out in the last couple of days with 2 readings on our floor. So we're moving things out pretty quickly now.
What was the last number from the last rules meeting?
You know, I don't remember. We have a comparison, the rules report kind of shows a comparison of where we are in relation to where the house is, and we try to keep that fairly close. And if I remember right, the numbers were very close on percentages at that point. But this last week, we've had some discrepancies there, and so we're going to be looking at that, managing it.
One thing we do know is that the number of bills requested is at or near record levels.
Do we know what number that is right now?
I don't know what that number is.
You mentioned gas tax is a big issue still on the table. Where do you see that headed?
It's hard to predict what the Senate will do as far as votes are concerned, but as I'm kind of listening around, reading the tea leaves, I think it has a chance of passage here in the Senate.
Senator Van Tassel's bill.
Senator Van Tassel's bill. It will probably come up either Monday or Tuesday for a vote on second reading calendar.
What about the House bill? Have you seen that one? Came out last night. It's on percentage
Is
based.
that Representative
Anderson.
Anderson's bill? I haven't had a chance to look at it.
I guess you said you don't want to predict what's going to happen, but there's been, the speaker I guess it was earlier this week, talked about the potential for blending the two together somehow, sort of merging the percentage, the value added or sales tax approach with a sort of more of a, I guess what's in Senator Van Tassel's bill. Have you guys talked about that as a possibility? Is that something you see as likelihood?
I think if we're not thinking about the likelihood of that, we're probably got our head in the sand. We know that either issue will have to pass the other body, and consequently, we're going to have to come together on something at the end of the day and work through that. My hope is that if we're looking at some kind of a percentage or index, that we do that on the rack price, that it isn't actually a percentage, but that percentage is translated into a per gallon, a cents per gallon tax. But there is, obviously there's some merit to having some kind of an index. Hopefully it's a broad-based index rather than the gas tax because of the volatility of the gas tax. Something like CPI or something like that it could be adjusted every year, broad-based, so it's a little more stable. But would probably relieve some of the pressure on gas tax in the future. It would grow like any other tax grows that's based on a percentage, like our income tax or our sales tax. And I think we're very open to that. We just see that it's probably the best policy as you inject some kind of a percentage to do that as an adjustment at the rack and let the tax commission make that adjustment every year based on that formula.
It's been 18 years since we've had an adjustment, and our local governments, especially because the state has access to some general funds and bonding, we've been able to do some really big projects and some good projects in transportation that need to be done on the I-15 corridor, some big projects. For our local governments who rely on that gas tax, that's their only source of income for transportation. They haven't had an increase in 18 years, and they don't have the opportunity to go out and raise a lot of money to be able to do projects. So I think it's really important that we do something. And usually we do end up with a blending of ideas. That's kind of the way this process works. And so I think that's very likely as well, that we'll end up doing some kind of a blend. I'm hearing from a lot of people who say, let's make sure it's transparent and call it a tax. If it's a tax, if it's an increase, it's an increase. And so I think there's different ways to look at it, but some kind of a blend where we're able to help, especially those locals immediately, so it isn't tied to something that might happen 2 years from now, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think we can do that. I think we can work those two ideas together.
Senator Hillier, maybe more generally, is there a need to reassess the sales tax? Is there a need for increased sales tax? I asked because when you had the budget numbers the other day, there was about $580 million in the education fund and about 160 in the general fund. And you can do some swapping still with higher ed, but you're running out of money there.
That's absolutely true, what you said there. I don't know how to do that. There's several ways. One would be to raise the sales tax. The others go back and look at some of the exemptions. For example, we talked about sales tax on food. If we were to remove that partial exemption we have, provide a credit for those who really need it on the sales tax, for the poor, rather than just everyone, and then had that money freed up, that would certainly help in these social service areas where the primary use of general funds has to be. It's really ironic because you're up here struggling trying to find some sales tax general fund to help these people in social services, to think that I don't pay sales tax on the food I buy, and neither does anyone, and except on that portion we are exempted, and I don't think I need an exemption, and so how do you really figure that back in? When we did it, it was about a $200 million cost. I don't know what it'd be now if we were to reinstate even part of it. That creates real emotions. People say you're taxing the poor when there's certainly a group in there, if they're not on food stamps, because I understand food stamps don't pay sales tax on their food. But the other people, there certainly is a small group in there that you really need to protect. But those people who are making over $50,000 or $60,000 a year, I don't know if they really need the same protection when the money could be used so effectively in social services. There's other exemptions that we've given, and a lot of those are economic development ones, and how do you it's got priming the well. If you drink the water and don't prime the well, you have a drink for a day, but you don't have the water flowing tomorrow. And a lot of these exemptions we've given have been business related to promote and make businesses work well, and it's working very well in the state. So that's the other issue you have to tie in all of that.
Reducing a lot of income tax, right?
Yeah, income tax.
Is that a discussion for a later day, or you think it's something you're going to have to deal with this year?
I've
We
always
won't
done,
be-
yeah, I've
yeah,
always done
we
the
won't be
budget
dealing
on
with
what
that
we
issue.
have here. And if there's a change made, I don't push a change just to get more money or whatever. It's something that I think we'd have to do with more heads up than just suddenly the last night make a dramatic change like that.
Adding a big issue like that to Medicaid expansion, prison relocation, everything else we're doing, I just don't think that would be happening this year. One other item would be if Congress was to pass the Marketplace Fairness Act, that would be probably a pretty big chunk of new general fund money, but don't hold your breath. They've been trying to pass that for I don't know how many years. I don't see that actually happening anytime soon.
When I first got involved, they talked about $130 million the state of Utah was losing. I'm sure it's more than that, except there's been a number of big players who now pay their sales tax. Amazon.com, I understand, has always been opposed to it, but now I understand they do pay their sales tax on sales, so online. So there's been a lot of companies who've switched and are now paying sales tax. So what the exact increase would be, I don't know.
We have a question from one of our viewers.
We have two.
All right, let's go to those questions.
Okay. First question, it's a little long, I'll just read it. Why do you feel it's necessary to give seniors, they mean in high school, more tests when we already have the Common Core that is testing our students to death? Not to mention we already have the problem of having immigration problems in the country. Why not just give it to the kids that are here legally and give them the opportunity to become citizens if they so choose? Not make it mandatory for the entire high school population. Why do our seniors need more tests? Why do you continue to test our kids to death? Why can't you allow them to enjoy learning?
Okay, that is in reference to Senator
Stevens.
Metz.
Senator Stevenson's.
Senator Stevenson's bill with regards to having testing to make sure, or I think incentivize our students to have a better view of our nation and our processes here. So, well, we really don't want to test anymore, but at least the Senate thought that this was a very worthy cause. It's not like a high stakes test like the SAGE test, the Common Core, some of the testing that's done in elementary school like the Dibbles test. This was a test to just incentivize our students to be aware of what's happening in our nation. It's important that you learn what this process is like here at the legislature, what's going on in Congress. It's essential to our rights and our freedom going forward, and at least the Senate thought that that was an important issue and important enough that we are asking that another test be put on the docket.
I think the question kind of goes to just kind of a busy work, kind of a test. And I think there was some discussion on the floor and an amendment to kind of address that issue. The bill actually was amended down to where it was a 50-question test rather than a 100-question test. And if you look at the test, the questions that are on the test, it's not something you would have to spend weeks preparing for. The questions that are on the test are pretty basic, and they're not something that you'd have to really spend a lot of time on to be able to pass the test. So there was that concern on the floor that was mentioned by the question, the viewer, and so that's why the bill was amended down to 50 rather than 100 questions. Just trying to make sure that we've got our kids thinking about these important lessons, the things that they need to know about our country and our processes. So we had the same concern.
Thank you for the question, though. That was a great question.
May I comment on that?
Yes.
Yeah, so what I was wondering is, rather than take a test, but it becomes everyday type of curriculum for the students, where if there's a government class being taught,
Yeah.
those type of concepts should really be presented to them to help them to be patriotic to the nation, to understand their rights, to understand how the legislature works. So is the test really bringing out the purpose of this bill? That's really a question for your consideration.
Yeah, and that was a question that was, and we debated on the Senate floor, and at the end, the bill passed, having a lot of those questions answered sufficiently for us to vote.
It's great.
Did you have some comments?
I think the one thing that on this testing is the fact that what we heard from educators is the fact that most of these answers to the questions are taught in elementary school, junior high, and high school civic classes or history classes. So children are being exposed to those answers at least 3 times during their education. Mandatory testing, I think we do a little bit too much. I think we need to back off on the mandatory testing a little bit. And just for an example, what I'm hearing now with some of the testing, some of the classes are basically out. There's no computer classes in some of their schools because they've already started their year-end testing now of students throughout the grades, and they'll never get back to the computers again for more education. So we've got to be mindful of that, I think, on the number of tests that we're doing. And what we really want to do is find out what the child's deficit is, I think, and be able to address those deficits to make them better students and to understand what the core curriculum is.
There's also a process comment that's only passed the Senate. It needs to pass the House, and if you have a feeling that this should not be something that should become law, you have the opportunity now to make your case before the House of Representatives, and if they don't pass the bill, it won't become law. Next question.
There's one more. From a different person. When are you going to stand up for renters' rights in Utah or propose legislation to do so?
Okay, anybody want to address that? Senator Davis?
I don't know I think there's some of those issues that are out there. They're always out there and amongst us. There are a number of cities that are looking at ordinances on that. I think the legislature traditionally has looked at property owner rights and the ability to rent their properties at wherever they should. We do have some problems in the state with moderate income housing. We need to take a closer look at that and address that in some way.
And that's what the legislature does. Every year we get, I think it's been about every year I've been here, we have a bill that deals with landlord-tenant rights. And it's our job now as the legislature to try and balance the rights of tenants, the rights of landlords, and try to mix them and come up with something that works for both the property owner and the tenant. And I suspect we'll have more legislation in the future, and we'll address that as it comes up. Thank you for the question.
Do you feel like we've got a good balance right now between the two?
I think one of the things, without going into the rental, or rather into the units, is the fact that we have adopted some basic laws dealing with fit premises. Cities and counties are dealing with that issue all the time on fit premises, and I think that helps make sure that people have housing that is fit to live in. And I think we need to do some more things in that. We need to take a look at how we can help as a state to make housing affordable for everyone.
So we passed, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the Good Landlord program, or authorized the Good Landlord program in statute. I believe we have a pretty good balance. I'm not hearing a lot of questions. This is a question that came up today, but I'm not hearing from a lot of constituents regarding this issue. I think we're at a pretty good balance right now. And the Good Landlord program that deals with fitness of premises, and maybe we need to look at those things a little bit more. But I believe at least we've struck a pretty good balance right now, and I'm sure we'll address some of those issues going forward. But what I am hearing a lot about is people from mobile home parks who are tenants. That's a real difficult question for the legislature always, because these tenants, they move, spending probably $1,000 or more, move a trailer house, or I shouldn't say trailer, it's a, what's the politically correct, prefab housing or mobile housing. They move that onto a rented pad site, and if they get evicted or they can't pay their rent, it's $1,000 or more to move that now somewhere else. And where is it moved if you're having struggles? So that is one of those issues that we grapple with regularly and are having a difficult time trying to strike a balance with property owners and those who own. It
becomes a real battle between real property owners and personal property owners, and how do you deal with their personal and real property and the transactions between people, and it's a difficult area to go. There's some things that we could do to alleviate that problem.
Yeah, and we'll have more discussion about that.
President, I've got one, maybe an answer to an earlier question.
Okay.
It's all right. Back to
here's the
to
numbers.
bills. I've got the real report. Rick Cantrell brought it in. We have right now 258 Senate bills that have been introduced to the Senate, and 403 House bills that have been introduced. So 661 total bills have been introduced in both houses. We have over 1,000 total bill requests that are out there. There are still a lot of bills that aren't ready to present and aren't out yet. So if we get somewhere near the 430 or so that we have been passing the last couple of years, we've got 200 more already than we're probably going to get passed from a time constraint issue, and still a lot that haven't been introduced. So that might give you some kind of an idea of where we are total-wise. We have a breakdown of bills that are passed and kind of where they're at. If you want that, we'll make that available to you after this meeting.
Any other questions? We want to thank our media for being here today, and thanks for the questions from our viewers over the internet. And please stay with us next week. Those will be some big issues, some important pieces of legislation to talk about, and hopefully you'll weigh in on those issues. Have a great weekend.